Here now to dissect last year's investigation and discuss the lessons learned is Thomas Ruskin, former New York City police detective, investigator, and president of his own security firm, CMP Protective and Investigative Group. He was involved in many high-profile cases, including the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center. And Mr. Ruskin joins us from Miami this morning. Mr. Ruskin, thanks for being with us. Of course, our hearts are with the victims a year after the tragedy, but it's also a time to figure out what happened. We learned recently that Russia, who was tracking Tamerlan Tsarnaev, the older brother, didn't share all the intel they had on him, including a phone call in which he discussed Islamic Jihad with his mother. We also know the FBI and CIA missed red flags, including Russian warnings that Tsarnaev had been radicalized. So let's start with that, the intel. How can that disconnect be prevented in the future?
Well, we have to learn from every single incident that we deal with from a law enforcement standpoint and from a crisis management standpoint. So what you look to do is you look to improve those intelligence networks, and it should supersede politics nowadays. I mean, the fact that Russia and the U.S. aren't getting along regarding Ukraine and have differences should not impact the intelligence or the possible terrorist threat in Russia or the U.S. or somewhere else in the world.
Let's break down some of the other lessons learned by law enforcement from this tragedy. How was the initial response to tracking down the suspects, in your estimation?
Oh, it was phenomenal. I mean, within days, they had both men. One was killed in a gunfight with police, and the other was in custody and is now facing the death penalty in federal court. So relative to the investigation between the Boston Police Department, the FBI, and all the other help that they got from outside agencies, it was phenomenal. I mean, you have two independent people who would be considered in law enforcement standards lone wolves coming into a very massive situation, being the Boston Marathon, and placing two pressure cookers that they put together themselves and exploiting that, killing all the innocent people that they killed, and then identifying them and bringing them into custody.
But before they were brought into custody, a lot happened between. Let's start with the coordination between Boston police and other police agencies in the vicinity, including MIT's campus police, which ended up losing an officer.
Right. Well, I mean, look, you have two, as I said, lone wolves. And a lone wolf, by definition, is someone who is not coordinating. It's not a terrorist plot. The plot was between the two brothers, the Tsarnaev brothers. And no one else knew what they were going to do. You have them coming into the scene. Now, it must have been agonizing for the Boston Police Department and the FBI to sit down and decide to put out that picture, because a lot can happen by putting out a picture of the two people you suspect. And in the days leading up to that, there were a couple times where the media got it wrong, where the media and the internet sleuths put out false names, sending people in different directions.
Yeah, and that certainly didn't help as things were unfolding. Besides the media mistakes, is there one thing, as you look back on the investigation, on the apprehension of the suspect, that you would have done differently as an experienced crisis management? One thing that really law enforcement can take as a lesson on this one-year anniversary?
Well, I mean, leading up to it, it would have been very nice had law enforcement and had the intelligence networks work together in at least monitoring this Tsarnaev brother, the older of the two, and knowing that he had become radicalized in this country. So someone may have looked at him, seen him, watched his postings online, and identified him as a potential terrorist. So that leading up. But as far as the investigation is concerned, we have the two in custody who were responsible for this heinous act a year ago, killing innocent people and injuring a lot of people. And, you know, you learn from every single incident that happens in this world, but we live in a free society, and it'd be almost impossible to stop a lone wolf from doing this anywhere in this country.
And of course, one of the suspects died during the shootout and was run over by his brother, and the other suspect, as you mentioned, is in custody.
And we lost a police officer.
That's right.
And we lost a police officer, an innocent police officer, guarding a campus in the area of the bombing.
Right, the MIT campus. All right, Thomas Ruskin, former New York City police detective, joining us from Miami. Thanks for your time this morning, sir.